The Haystack by William Henry Fox Talbot. Imagine standing in a quiet English countryside in the year 1844. The air smells of cut grass and damp earth. In front of you rises a massive haystack, thatched, towering, almost architectural in its presence. A wooden ladder leans against it at a bold diagonal. Leaves rustle in the trees behind, and a man points a strange wooden box at all of this, holds still, and waits. That man is William Henry Fox Talbot, and what he is doing, quietly, patiently, in a field, will change the way humanity sees the world forever. Who was Fox Talbot? William Henry Fox Talbot was born in 1800 in Dorset, England, into a wealthy and intellectually distinguished family. He was, by any measure, a polymath. He studied at Cambridge, became a member of Parliament, published work in mathematics, astronomy, and linguistics, and even contributed to the decipherment of ancient Assyrian cuneiform. But it is photography for which history remembers him most. The story of how he came to invent photography is, in itself, beautifully human. In 1833, while on his honeymoon at Lake Como in Italy, Talbot was attempting to sketch the landscape using a device called a camera lucida, essentially a prism that projects a faint image onto paper, which the artist then traces. He was, by his own admission, not a gifted draftsman, and his results frustrated him. Standing there, looking at his clumsy tracings, he had a thought that would echo through history. What if the image could fix itself? He returned to England and began experimenting. By 1835, he had produced what are now called photogenic drawings, images made by placing objects directly onto light-sensitive paper. His earliest surviving photograph, a tiny image of a latticed window at his home Lecoq Abbey, dates from that year. It measures barely an inch across, yet it is one of the most consequential images ever made. In 1839, when the Frenchman Louis Daguerre publicly announced his own photographic process, Talbot rushed to present his work to the Royal Institution, determined to establish his own priority. The two processes were fundamentally different. Daguerre produced singular, highly detailed metal plates. Talbot invented the negative-positive process, a paper, negative from which multiple prints could be made. His method, which he eventually called the Calotype, is the direct ancestor of virtually all film photography that followed. The Haystack, looking at the image. Now let us turn to the photograph itself. The Haystack, made in 1844, was published in Talbot's landmark book, The Pencil of Nature, the world's first commercially published book illustrated with photographs. That alone tells us something about how Talbot saw this image, not as a casual snapshot, but as a demonstration of what photography could do and what it could mean. At first glance, the subject seems almost deliberately ordinary. A haystack, a ladder, some trees. There is no human figure, no dramatic event, no grand landscape. And yet the image holds you. The haystack dominates the frame with remarkable authority. It fills nearly the entire picture plane, rising from the lower corners and pressing against the top edge of the image. Talbot has positioned himself close, much closer than one might expect, so that the haystack becomes less a rustic object and more an overwhelming presence, almost like a wall or a cliff face. The texture of the straw is rendered with extraordinary richness, thousands of individual strands catching the light, creating a dense, almost tactile surface. You feel you could reach out and run your hand across it. The ladder is the image's great compositional stroke. It leans diagonally across the left face of the haystack, cutting against the soft, organic mass of straw with hard geometric precision. It is a line of human intention inside a landscape of natural accumulation. Someone climbed this ladder, Someone built this stack. The latter implies a body, a task, a life, even though no person appears in the frame. This was, in part, practical. Early calotype exposures were long, sometimes several minutes, making it nearly impossible to photograph moving subjects. Talbot often turned this limitation into an aesthetic choice, composing scenes that feel still, contemplative, almost suspended in time. The absence of people gives his photographs a particular kind of quiet. They feel like the world just after everyone has left, or just before they return. The tonal quality of the calotype process itself contributes enormously to the mood. Unlike the sharp, silvery precision of a daguerreotype, the calotype produces soft, warm, slightly grainy images, a sepia world of gentle contrasts and rich mid-tones. The haystack glows against the dark trees behind it. The shadows under the overhanging thatch are deep and velvety. There is something almost painterly about it, something that would not look out of place beside a constable or a turner. Why this image matters. Talbot himself wrote about the haystack in The Pencil of Nature, and his words are remarkably forward-thinking. He noted that a photograph captures not just what the photographer intends, but everything within the frame, every straw, every shadow, every incidental detail. He imagined a future in which photographs would serve as legal evidence, as historical records, as documents of things that would otherwise be lost to time. He was right, of course, but the haystack reminds us that photography was also, from its very beginning, an art form, one attentive to light, to geometry, to the quiet dignity of ordinary things. There is something deeply moving about this image when you know its context. This is not just a haystack. It is one of the earliest photographs ever made of the natural world. The man who made it had taught himself an entirely new way of seeing, had, in a very real sense, given eyes to time itself. And he chose, in one of his defining early works, to point those eyes at something humble, rural, and transient. A stack of hay that has long since rotted away, a ladder that nobody remembers, a moment in an English field in 1844 that, against all odds, is still here. Fox Talbot died in 1877 at the age of 77, having lived long enough to see photography transform journalism, science, portraiture, and memory itself. He could not have imagined the billions of photographs made every day in our time, but in a very real sense, every one of them begins with him, standing in a field, pointing a box at a haystack, and waiting for the light to do something miraculous. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this analysis, please subscribe and leave a comment below. What other works would you like to explore? See you next time.